Hello, and welcome back to the Your Body Has Your Back podcast. We are coming at you today with episode 12, which is the last episode for the first season of the podcast. I can't believe it.
Woohoo!
So to wrap up this first season, we decided to dive into the topic of weight loss, which is a very loaded and often very polarizing topic to discuss. So I'm excited to dive into all of this with you guys today. And I want to preface this conversation on weight loss by saying that both Abby and I really respect an individual's desire to want to lose weight, to want to feel good in their body. There is absolutely nothing wrong with having aesthetic goals, and there is no judgment here. But the problem is that we are seeing in practice, I messed that up. I might just start from the beginning. Sorry, Will. Okay. Should I just start from the beginning or just start from that last paragraph?
Whichever you want to.
Okay.
Do you feel like it felt funny from the start?
Now I'm just kind of like, I'm just going to start over.
Yeah, perfect.
So, okay. All right. Starting over, Will. Hello, and welcome back to the Your Body Has Your Back podcast. We are coming at you today with episode 12, which is the last episode for the first season of the podcast, which is crazy. Woo woo. So
Woo-hoo.
To wrap up this first season, we decided to dive into the topic of weight loss, which is a loaded and often very, very polarizing topic to discuss. So why not, dive into it in the last episode of the season? So I want to preface this conversation on weight loss by saying both Abby and I respect an individual's desire to want to lose weight or to want to feel good in their body from an aesthetic perspective. There is nothing wrong with having aesthetic goals, and there is absolutely no judgment here. But the problem we're seeing in practice is with how clients are going about weight loss. We're seeing clients obsess about weight loss and pursue weight loss in a way that is actually detrimental to their own health and taking them farther and farther away from their goals. So the purpose of this episode is really to create space for a more nuanced conversation about weight loss and to really share what Abby and I are seeing in practice day in and day out.
In thinking about weight loss, Jillian and I have kind of created 3 avatars that are based on what we see in practice, often with our female clients, but with weight loss in general, that really depict 3 main characters or 3 main categories, rather, of those that pursue weight loss and where we often see barriers that these individuals kind of run into in some of the practices where they have come from or some of the practices that they have really done in seeking weight loss over the years. And so our goal in sharing these categories with you is really so that if you can see yourself in one of these categories, one of these kind of depictions, that this can help to unravel some of the behaviors that we might be continuously practicing that's actually impeding our own ability to achieve the goals that we have for weight loss, to achieve the goals that we have for our health, to achieve the goals that we have for the abundance that we want in life. So as we said, there's kind of 3 avatars, 3 categories. And our first category would be the chronic dieter or the yo-yo dieter. So these are people who participate in many of the fad diets, using quotations over here, maybe jumping from one type of eating approach to another, following the self-described solution to weight loss that is selling at the moment, be it keto or low carb or Atkins or the myriad of others. And I'll share, in high school, I started on my first fad diet, the South Beach diet, with the delusion that I would lose 20 pounds in a month or some insane timeline, and was so frustrated when A, the diet was too restrictive for my own lifestyle, and B, I was starving the whole time, being a self-described maybe athlete. I don't think I would call myself an athlete, but in high school, really, where it was undernourishing. So I would have fallen in, at that time in my life, into this category personally of really just wanting the quick solution. So the second is really the underfueled and overstressed. So this is someone who's chronically under eating calories, most likely minerals and nutrients also. And they're the kind of underfueling alone is stressful to the body. But then we often see these individuals applying additional stress with over exercising, and more recent years also participating in like long-term fasting or intermittent fasting. And really what we see here is that this is the recipe to kick off a massive adaptive stress response in the body that actually works against many of the goals that we have around body composition and weight loss. And our third is the last 10-pound people. So sometimes these people fall under two categories, and it's not uncommon to see bodies that fight to hold on to weight when there's excessive caloric restriction or carbohydrate restriction or over stress from exercise or fasting, kind of adapting to preserve adipose tissue as a survival mechanism. After all, as humans, our amazing adaptive response to store adipose tissue is legitimately the only reason humans have been able to survive for so long. So let's give some gratitude for that protective mechanism that quite literally saves our lives. But this is the group, and oftentimes the others for that matter, that we see small tweaks that can make a massive difference in their bodies restoring a belief of safety and allowing for the release of that last 10 pounds as the body has to feel safe to release weight. So our three avatars are really meant, again, to kind of create some of the structure around where we might find ourselves or where we might even know some others in our lives or where we've been at different times in our lives, and ways for us to start to kind of unravel some of those behaviors and really begin to understand what is really happening in the body when we're going to achieve weight loss or when we're on the goals of weight loss, and what are the practices that we really want to be inviting in order to achieve both our health and our weight loss goals. So Jilly's going to dive into a little bit more about what's actually involved in weight loss.
Yeah, so I love kind of talking about this piece of things because there is so much confusion out there, so much, kind of mixed messaging. And ideally, if you have kind of seen yourself in one of those avatars or, any of those things resonate with you, you'll feel a lot more clear and confident when you're done listening to this episode. But I feel like we can't dive into anything without actually talking about like what is involved with weight loss and weight regulation. So first of all, when we are talking about weight loss, really at the end of the day, we're talking about fat loss. When we want to lose weight, we don't actually want to lose lean muscle or, lose other things in the body outside of fat. So when we're talking about weight loss, really we're talking about fat loss. And I think that's an important distinction to make. So the physiological process for fat loss or for burning fat occurs when fat cells, referred to as adipocytes, open up and release fats into circulation in the body. This process of liberating fats from fat cells is referred to as lipolysis. After lipolysis or fat mobilization occurs, these fatty acids then enter our cells and they go through a process called oxidation. This is where the fatty acids are then converted into energy or ATP, and they are used by the body. This process of oxidation, I have to point out, and I won't go down a rabbit hole here, but the process of oxidation where we're actually, utilizing and, burning the fat that we, released from the fat cells, this actually requires healthy mitochondria. That's like a huge, huge piece of things. So if we can't oxidize fats and there's, things going on with the mitochondria, or there's things preventing our body from utilizing the fat that we are releasing from these fat cells, it will end up getting stored again. So we have lipolysis or the mobilization of fats, and then we have the fat oxidation where we're using, that fat for energy. And in a nutshell, this is kind of how fat loss occurs. So both of these things need to be supported in terms of seeing shifts with body composition and, losing fat, not just losing muscle, and other things in the body. So when it comes to weight loss or fat loss, there is nothing more polarizing than the calories in versus calories out debate, which basically argues that if you are not losing weight, you are not seeing fat loss, then you're either eating too much or you are exercising too little, and it all boils down to energy balance. Ultimately, calories do matter. And I would be lying to you if I said that energy balance was irrelevant and, calories in, calories out didn't matter. But the idea that fat loss is all about energy balance and how many calories you eat or burn alone is a really, really big oversimplification of how, the body works and, how fat loss works. So yes, energy balance matters, but what we need to consider are all of the different variables that are influencing energy utilization and energy storage. So to name a few things here, energy balance is influenced by sleep, the balance of macronutrients that our calories are actually coming from, the energy and nutrient density of foods, your microbiome and how many calories you are actually absorbing from food itself, stress, how your thyroid is functioning. So a lot of things are going to influence energy balance here. Another big one is insulin. So insulin plays a huge role in energy utilization and fat storage, and a strict calories in versus calories out approach does not account for any of these things that I'm mentioning. So again, it's, if we get too zoomed in on the calories in versus calories out, we are going to miss the mark ultimately. So we need to acknowledge that energy balance matters, but we have to zoom out and assess all of the different things that are affecting that energy balance at the end of the day. I also think it's really important to point out that calorie counters can be off pretty significantly. So by up to about 20 to 30%, depending on what app you're using, MyFitnessPal, Chronometer, whatever it is. So they can be pretty off in healthy individuals. And the FDA also allows for inaccuracies with calorie reporting on food labels up to 20%, which is pretty significant. So I just really want to emphasize these things, not to discredit, calories or to say that they are irrelevant, but really to put things into perspective. So we just want to make sure that we understand the nuance here. We understand that there are some inaccuracies, that there are a lot of variables impacting energy balance, and we don't want to become overly fixated on calories and calorie deficits because, we can end up on that slippery slope where we're fixating on something that isn't moving the needle with our health and may actually just be creating a lot of stress at the end of the day. In practice, Abby and I are both seeing this fixation on weight loss or fat loss through, the calorie restriction and that calorie restriction only. And we're seeing it with women who are continually eating less, working out more, restricting more, working out harder, in pursuit of weight loss, and often just completely neglecting the things that their body need fundamentally to actually support a healthy, sustainable body weight, that is naturally maintained, which is the goal. More often than not, when the body is chronically holding on to more weight than what feels comfortable, this is a sign that there are some deeper things going on that are impacting energy balance, like issues with hormones, issues with blood sugar and insulin. So at the end of the day, we really want to drive home that weight is a symptom, just like acne, bloating, PMS. Chasing a symptom harder and harder and harder and trying to force things through, deprivation is not going to help you achieve results. It's going to put you on a hamster wheel where you're going in circles and circles at the end of the day. So we'll talk, in a few minutes about what actually happens if we're chronically chasing weight with a calorie deficit, and, kind of how and when this can be actually detrimental for weight loss. But again, we just want to drive home here that fat loss and supporting the fat mobilization, the fat oxidation, it really requires a healthy metabolism, balanced blood sugar, a healthy liver, healthy adrenal function. And it's just something that is often overlooked. And because the conversations are so polarizing, it's like you're either in one camp or the other. But, typically the sweet spot is somewhere in the middle. And yes, calories matter, but we need to zoom out to assess all of these variables at play here.
I love the statement, weight is a symptom. I say that to clients all the time. I'm like, well, let's add it to the symptom list along with your constipation, along with your fatigue, along with your acne. And and we're going to, we're achieving, we're looking, and we're getting curious about where are all those symptoms coming from. And I feel like when clients, and I know yours feel the same, like when we really put it in perspective like that, I feel like it allows my clients to like have a sigh of relief that they're like, oh my God, like, okay, so there's a reason why my body's holding on to this weight, or why maybe it gained this weight, or why I'm not losing it, in snapping my fingers and starving myself, or whatever things that they're like practicing. Because when we look at it, we're like, there's a reason. The body's not just doing it because it like, I hate you and I'm going to gain all this weight, or I'm going to hold on to this weight. Like there are things at play. And so when we think of it as a symptom, it allows us to know that we have so many tools to really utilize when we're looking to alleviate and heal the body and eliminate symptoms.
100%. And it kind of speaks to just the overall work that we do and the approach that we take through a functional medicine lens in terms of, understanding those deeper dynamics at play and supporting the body back to a place of balance, and not just suppressing symptoms or trying to force the body to do something that it is not ready to do. So, to what Abby had mentioned earlier too, that our bodies are pretty incredible and we really were hardwired for survival. So if there is resistance there and you feel like your body is holding on to, more weight than what feels comfortable and natural and healthy for you, let's listen to that. Let's get curious. And I just think that's a really powerful way to look at things.
Yeah. And I think, Jillian, I feel very strongly that the first step in weight loss is actually looking at our mindset as the
100%.
The biggest thing. Yeah. And we really need a major shift in our view on weight loss. Kind of side note, I do feel it like creeping in younger generations, of this like a different view, or a little bit more of a holistic view of weight loss. At least that's like sometimes what I see on like TikTok now that I'm like trying to get on there.
I hope so.
Yeah. So, I'm hoping that it's going to get louder, but then again, there's now like injectable diabetes medications that are entering the scene and everybody's like losing their mind. So I think we've got some work to do. Like, we're not going to go in that today, but like Jillian and I could go off on that topic.
Oh my gosh, yes.
We're not in support. Anyways, so I think we should start by saying that we can't bully our body into weight loss, at least sustainable weight loss that also accompanies overall improvements in health. As there's now a fork in the road with so many fad diets potentially providing, weight loss, but at the expense of health. We often see a fixation on achieving weight loss, or a fixation to maintain a low weight that disregards any ill health symptoms that come along, such as hormonal imbalances, anxiety, compulsive food thoughts, constipation, hair thinning. The list goes on. So first, we have to recognize the fear mongering. The fast fixes of weight loss are not promising happiness, or that once you achieve the weight loss that you're going to be more deserving of your dreams and your goals that you desire, but rather that you are deserving of everything you desire right now based on the simple fact that you exist in this world at this moment. You have a purpose that is so much greater than simply to be on this earth taking up less space. Let's aim to every day remind ourselves of that deep ingrained deservingness instead of stepping on the scale or zipping up our pants every morning and searching for evidence as to why we are or are not worthy. Let's start with in the morning with a practice that invites in the belief that we are worthy and deserving. We are choosing to nourish our bodies every day in a gentle and loving way that is more like how we would treat a best friend or speak to a best friend or a loved one. That is the energy that we want to start to support all of our goals in our health, all of our goals in our life from that place of deep deserving. So this is where we talk so much about the journey of our physical health also being a journey into our emotional health. Maybe that practice has nothing to do with food or movement. Maybe that practice is reading a couple pages of an inspiring book, or starting a gratitude journal, or swapping out your HIIT workout for a gentle morning walk or light exposure and allowing your mind to wander. So we want to be finding joy in the process and reflecting on how our behaviors and our practices and our thoughts actually feel for ourselves in our day-to-day life. And if there's something that doesn't feel right, maybe we explore changing it up. Where are you pushing yourself to a limit, grinding, exhausting, loading on more? That, I'm not losing weight, so I'm going to eat less. I'm going to exercise more. I'm going to put more, stress. And instead inviting in this idea of softening in those areas first, getting curious about what alternative might exist that might feel more supportive, and really coming from a place of that supportive nourishment. We've talked about this before. So the idea of eating breakfast versus long fasting, low intensity versus high intensity workouts, regular meals, incorporating whole food carbohydrates, and making these swaps because you love your body or you have neutrality towards it first, not because you hate it. And those are the places, that is the first step that we both really firmly feel is where we want to practice and where we want to spend time as we embark on any sort of weight loss or bettering of health. Like where is our why? Where are we coming into this from? And is it from a place of support, or is it from a place of restriction and bullying?
The mindset pieces that you're describing, this stuff is really, really powerful. And there is a reason that we're kind of talking about the mindset right up front, because we see the barriers that, mindset blind spots and issues with mindset creates in terms of, seeing really any results on a healing journey. And it's something that's very much overlooked, but you can't bypass that, piece of the journey. And to even speak specifically to, some of my work with clients in the Empowered PCOS group program that I run, the first modules that people are going through are mindset modules. They are pre-programmed modules that I require people to go through to set them up for success as they dive into, deeper physical healing and strategies and nutrition, because how we approach these things is everything. And I love the way that, kind of, Abby, you talk about just like showing up for yourself, and creating that space and finding joy in the process. And I mean, how amazing would it feel to, shift away from that deprivation, punishment, restriction approach to a place of like that softness and acceptance, and to be able to acknowledge like, hey, I have, health goals, and there's some things that I'd like to see shift aesthetically, but I'm going to show up for myself today. And, I'm going to find joy today because I'm deserving of that. And I can still work towards, these other things at the same time. And I'm probably going to be a lot more effective at doing so when, I allow myself to find joy and happiness in the process.
And then we find greater success, and we find happiness in that more than the like, I'll be happy when, I'll be that like waiting, that carrot at the end of, the carrot that we can never reach because it's too far out of like just in front of us, that we're constantly trying to get at on this kind of hamster wheel that's not moving us anywhere because we're creating just like more stress in the process. And it's so funny, in Empowered PCOS and in No Drama Digestion, like, in that program, we also start with mindset, and we're looking to heal the gut. So, when we think about like healing our hormones or healing the gut or weight loss, like it is our mindset that first and foremost is, in our perspective and in our, 15 years of practice, that's the medicine just as much as, okay, what am I going to eat? Or how am I going to move? Or, what are the nitty gritty things that I'm going to do? Is we have to start with like, where are we coming from? Where is the energy coming from for us? And I think it makes the journey, because, this is our life. And as much as we have goals, it's kind of like, can we participate in our life every single day and not wait to participate in our life when we get to XYZ place, when we, finally achieve the carrot, which like usually isn't it's never what we want it to be.
Yeah.
So let's enjoy it now.
100%. I was just going to say, and you like took the words right out of my mouth, like don't live on the sideline of your life, right? Be an active participant and, allow yourself to find happiness and joy where you're at, even as you're working towards the carrot and, the other things that you want to achieve. So, the mindset piece is just so powerful. We could literally just talk about the mindset stuff, for this entire episode. But we will move on and dive into other aspects of, kind of talking about weight loss, but just know how important the mindset piece is. And if that resonates with you, I would definitely encourage you to explore that, and start to think about some of the things that Abby mentioned in terms of where you can create space for yourself, create softness in the entire approach. So next, I want to kind of dive into talking about crash dieting, the vicious kind of hamster wheel situation that, we've mentioned, and explain this a little bit more. So when it comes to crash dieting is one of the absolute worst, I will say, things that you can do for your health and ultimately for your weight. Extreme diets and extreme caloric restriction can produce immediate weight loss or, some shifts with weight in immediate sense, which, might sound like a good thing. But rapid weight loss is not typically a good thing at all. When we lose weight too quickly, this usually means that the body is not just losing fat and, going through that mobilization, oxidation that we discussed earlier. Usually it means we're losing lean muscle because, when the body senses that extreme scarcity and deprivation, it wants to preserve fat as a protective mechanism because, again, bodies are really cool and, want to keep us safe. And if we are losing lean muscle, this is a big deal. Having lean muscle is what actually helps to support our metabolism and metabolic function and to maintain insulin sensitivity. When you're in a significant caloric deficit, this is also going to impact thyroid hormone conversion, which will further lower your metabolism and metabolic function. So know that the crash dieting, the rapid weight loss, even though you may see the results in an immediate sense, long term, this actually can do a lot of damage. And this kind of speaks to the concept of metabolic adaptation, where your body is, basically decreasing its metabolic rate as, that protective mechanism. Therefore, you need less and less and less calories over time to maintain that same weight. And Abby and I were just kind of talking about this before we hopped on to record that we really want to drive home the fact that operating on limited resources is not a good thing. We want a healthy, robust metabolism, and we want our body to utilize resources and energy really efficiently, so all of the systems and organs in our body can function optimally. So that metabolic adaptation from extreme restriction, chronic dieting, not a good thing. One of the most prominent examples of what I'm talking about here is the study that was done on the Biggest Loser participants a few years ago. So this is the show where contestants are on these, crazy intense diets. They're working out for an insane number of hours daily, and they are pushing rapid weight loss for this show. And in 2015, about 6 years after a particular season of the show aired, this study followed up with the contestants, and the contestants came back for, an evaluation. And it was found that on average, participants gained back 70% of the weight that they lost initially. And they were also burning 700 fewer calories per day than when they started the show initially. So what this is telling us is that the damage to their metabolism that occurred from rapid weight loss did not improve when, they gained a little bit of weight. Their metabolism remained damaged and they gain weight. So now it's even harder to, get to a healthy body weight that's comfortable because we're in this metabolic compensation state. So this is a more extreme example, but this is honestly what Abby and I are seeing day in and day out in practice, where women are chronically under fueling, over exercising, chasing weight loss at the expense of their health, their hormones, their metabolism. And the body just resists things more and more and more over time. I have to point out too that, dieting and weight cycling is actually one of the biggest risk factors for weight gain. And, as we continue to engage in these restrictive, extreme practices, the satiety cues atrophy and we can't feel fullness as well. We experience more insulin resistance. So there's all of these different internal shifts that occur that, again, really just kind of take us farther away from health.
I mean, that idea of like the body is like, that was the scariest thing that has ever happened in terms of like The Biggest Loser. It's like the body was like, I don't know what happened. I lost all this weight so quickly. And I was like running from a tiger for my life, that the second we stopped running, the second that those bodies like had, or they didn't stop, many of them continued the same type of practices, the exercise and the eating. It's not that they like got, sloppy and like lazy. They were doing very much like similar practices to what they had been doing. It was just their body hit a certain point that it was like, not anymore. We are going to protect you, and you're not slowing down and protecting and supporting yourself. So we're going to make the decision for you. The body's like, that was the scariest thing that ever happened, and we're never going to have that happen again. So therefore, we're going to make the decision to make all of these compensations. And it's a beautiful thing when we can look at it, a little bit more subjectively of like, wow, my body loves me so much that it's actually going to change and adapt so that I don't like poof and fall off the planet, because that's, kind of what it believes. It's like, oh my gosh, we're going to get eaten by this tiger. We're going to, and under all these stressors that we're experiencing. And so when we start to see it from like, our body's on our side, and it wants you to achieve everything that you're like put on this planet to achieve, but it knows that there's like more important things than being in the smallest size body. And that's really that vitality. And that's that, we think about like when you look at someone and you're like, wow, they're just glowing. Like when we are existing on mere, in that restrictive mindset, like that's not this idea that can allow us to like glow and thrive and have all of this kind of vitality. It's more of just survival, and survival is not where we get to achieve those, more robust experiences of health.
Amen. Couldn't have said it better. And it's just something that is not talked about enough. And I just love the perspective shift of like appreciating that mechanism and not being frustrated with like, oh my gosh, my body's creating roadblocks for me. It's like, no, your body is like deeply, deeply, wanting to protect you. And this kind of speaks to what we've been talking about all season in terms of working with your body, not against it. So just really, really kind of powerful perspective shift.
So I think when we start to shift that perspective, then we can see much more clearly, like when we fall out of alignment with that. And it's a little bit more of like, oh, well, duh, like I haven't been sleeping, or I haven't been like nourishing my body, or I've been skipping meals, maybe unintentionally because life got busy, or, whatever. But it's like we start to see those things much more clearly and kind of can more quickly put ourselves kind of into alignment. And more of the practice of like our responsibility in our health and weight loss goals, if we have them, especially in this chaotic 21st century modern world, is to invite in the lifestyle and nutrition practices that prioritize safety in the body. Because when we prioritize safety, it means we are inviting in supportive practices that focus on nourishment, meeting our body's needs, and reevaluating our relationship to stressors that can directly impede our goals of both health and sustainable weight loss. So some of the major practices, this is where we're going to actually talk about like, well, what the heck can we do, if we have weight loss goals? This is really where we're going to get into some of those practices. And, there's so much of what we've been talking about this whole season. And the first we're going to hit on is balanced blood sugar, and really aiming to ensure that both when we eat and what we eat are optimizing for more balanced blood sugar to keep our bodies off of the stress-filled and inflammatory blood sugar roller coaster. So we're inviting in breakfast. We're focusing on protein. We're having regular meals every 3 to 4 hours, optimal caloric intake. We're avoiding longer-term fasts that can increase stress and throw off blood sugar even more. And really, research supports eating in alignment with our circadian rhythm. That kind of circadian eating is an effective tool to improve metabolic health and thus a tool for improved body composition in women with PCOS. So now we're even talking about coming to these practices of when we eat and how we eat can help to regulate weight loss in women with dysregulated hormones. So when we think about kind of, we can take that and put it into so many different people who maybe don't have a formal PCOS dynamic, but really the idea that when we have this patterning, when we work with our bodies, we can see so much more alignment in the optimal function of our hormonal regulations and our release of or balance of metabolism and weight and energy and all of those pieces in our health. Another is prioritizing sleep. Sleep is the most underutilized tool for weight loss, and it's sleep. I'm like, it's so easy, or well, not easy necessarily, but it's sleep. Like, it's lovely. Big sleep fan over here. Both of us are. But research has consistently demonstrated that short sleep duration of 6 hours or less is associated with higher BMI, risk of weight gain, and obesity. It has also been shown to result in greater metabolic dysfunction that impacts insulin and blood sugar regulation, promotes consumption of higher carbohydrate processed foods, dysregulates our hunger and satiety hormones, and leads to disruptions in cortisol patterning, which can further disrupt hormones and sleep patterns. And that's really just 6 hours. So, what we're aiming for is that 7 to 9. So that's like 1 hour deficit out of where we want to be. That's not a ton of time that can lead to such a breakdown. So research really shows that only 1 hour of sleep reduction for 5 nights a week leads to a less proportion of fat mass lost in individuals undergoing caloric restriction versus caloric restriction alone. They're finding that the sleep reduction may adversely affect changes in body composition, and the catch-up sleep doesn't completely reverse it. So even when we do find time to sleep more, because of that dysregulation in sleep, we're not seeing that, oh, I just slept extra over the weekend, or oh, I just, came into more sleep time. It's really that patterning and that consistency that we're seeing the benefit from. So focusing on sleep patterns, really aiming for that 7 to 9 hours a night, with particularly focus on consistent sleep timing that's in alignment with our circadian rhythm. This has been shown to more successfully promote weight loss and weight maintenance. Another is movement. And movement's a beneficial part of a weight loss journey, really due to its role in establishing better hormonal regulation and reducing the kind of compensatory adjustments that often can lead to weight gain. So exercise or movement's been shown to restore sensitivity to key hormone chemicals, leptin and ghrelin most specifically, that play significant roles in food intake, insulin resistance, and weight loss. So exercise reduces leptin concentrations that restore leptin sensitivity and show reduced post-meal ghrelin levels for greater satiety to meals. So both of these, the greater sensitivity to leptin and the reduction in kind of elevated levels of ghrelin post meals, plays a significant role in weight loss and helps us to achieve more satiety from our meals. And we can see, more insulin sensitivity and a whole cascade of other benefits that can come from the balance of, or the more sensitizing of these hormones. Exercise additionally, or movement, specifically resistance training, or a highlight for resistance training, in the face of mild caloric restriction, has shown to help maintain a higher daily energy expenditure following weight loss. So caloric restriction without exercise shows a reduction in energy expenditure after weight loss, which is one contributor to weight regain after weight loss. So this is a little bit of what we were talking about in the Biggest Loser, when we're doing extreme levels of exercise and extreme levels of caloric restriction too great of a stress. When we're doing mild levels, we can see actually a protective response from movement resistance training. So it's all in the Goldilocks in terms of the approach when it comes to weight loss. And I think in general, I really like to use the term movement more than exercise, as movement feels a little bit more suggestive of moving the body in a way that feels good. And really the most important part of movement is that we're doing something physical every day that we're more likely to do consistently. So be it walking or resistance training, or maybe there's short bursts of HIIT training or interval training, something that we're practicing in our life in a form of movement that feels like something that we can do for really most days, just to get movement. And if we can do it outside, even more the better. And the last pillar would be nervous system support. So a key area of successful weight loss is helping to support a balanced nervous system through stress balancing practices. So our nervous system is a major area that determines our body's safety. And we must be in a body that feels safe in order to release weight. So practicing calming stress practices every day, ideally, actually, can we do these 2 to 3 times per day, and kind of breaking up our day with some of these stress balancing practices such as deep breathing, spending time in nature, walking, meditation, coloring. Many other examples of calming practices exist, are a major tool that's often overlooked in this kind of weight loss world. And in general, we really want to be thinking about minimizing things that are causing that kind of stress or compensation state. So we've really kind of talked about the idea of caloric restriction, which is a stressor. So we need to be mindful that there is a degree of caloric restriction that is a stressor. So we want to be mindful of other significant amounts of stressors in our lives, in our kind of day-to-day. So some of those would be extreme caloric restriction, which would exceed 500 calories or more below our total caloric expenditure. So ideally, if we're practicing caloric restriction, we're not exceeding about 100 to 300 calories of a daily deficit. And we're aiming to not be in that chronic deficit for a long period of time. So that might be such as beyond 3 months. And then being mindful of other stressors like extreme exercise, prolonged fasting, high stress practices without that kind of calming to our body and our mind, and really being, aware of how we're feeling in our own body. And Jillie's going to talk about that in terms of looking for what we're really looking for in terms of to feel when we're going through or preparing for a weight loss journey.
And something I just want to point out here in terms of even a more mild caloric deficit with the 100 to 300 calories and, doing it over a thoughtful period of time and being very intentional about it, we still have to assess the context here. So pursuing, even a more subtle caloric deficit in the context of we're getting 5 hours of sleep a night, our eating is really erratic, stress is through the roof. The added stress of a caloric deficit is not going to lead us to positive shifts with body composition. So just a reminder that there are times where making, finer adjustments to caloric intake can, be helpful and beneficial, but it all boils down to context. Context is king. We talked a bit about the concept of hormesis in one of our previous episodes where we talked about stress and, knocking the body out of homeostasis can be healthy and adaptive. But, if we're, living in a state of stress, adding in more stressors doesn't produce a benefit. And it actually ultimately will kind of blunt that adaptation response that we're looking for. So context is king.
Yes. We would really say those big kind of foundation boulders really need to be in place before we're going on a weight loss journey. So it's almost like the cherry on top of the cake. When you've built the foundation, then we can start to do some disruption to that foundation and start to kind of cycle in some of these mild stressors because we've got a solid foundation. We're not standing on quicksand to begin with. And that's so hugely important and kind of goes perfectly into our next point of, for many women, particularly those that have been chronically dieting or practicing a very low caloric intake for a prolonged period of time, so we're standing on quicksand with some of these practices, may need to allow their bodies to find safety in a healing phase through more balanced lifestyle and eating practices before they begin a weight loss journey. And for some, this can actually result in maybe a slight weight gain before the body is comfortable releasing weight. So this concept is kind of known as safety weight. And for some women, their hormones need more repair and healing before they can be successful on a weight loss journey. We can't add stress on top of stress on top of stress and expect that we're going to get, the results that we're looking for, as we've been talking about. We can often see this when a woman has been putting her body under stress for a prolonged period of time, again, such as the low caloric intake, or maybe it's low carbohydrate intake, maybe it's excess exercise, lack of sleep, high stress environment. The list could go on. So this might look like finding more balance, increasing caloric intake to or even above your daily needs, swapping out higher intensity exercise with lower impact, such as walking or resistance training, focusing on nourishing the body with optimal protein and nutrient intake, sleep, circadian rhythm, and stress practices for a couple of weeks or months to allow for the compensatory stress response to repair and rebalance. We really want to be practicing these foundations for a prolonged period of time and really achieve this feeling of safety in the body. As putting more stress, such as caloric restriction, on an already stressed body isn't going to result in supportive weight loss. It's only going to result in more breakdown. So when we allow for a period of safety, we allow for the body to intelligently release weight without creating more dysfunction.
And this is where it's also important to highlight that everyone's timeline is going to look very, very different, depending on your history and a variety of factors. If you are someone that has a significant history of chronic restrictive dieting, it may be a longer term healing process for you to, kind of restore balance with hormones, to kind of make the body feel safe, and to get to that place where it feels comfortable making shifts. And this isn't something that people always like to hear, but for many women, this could be a multi-year process. And it doesn't mean that, we're hanging out and not seeing any improvements with things for years. Ideally, we're going to see lots of incremental shifts and improvements with all sorts of symptoms. But from a weight perspective, it's often the last thing to shift, or one of the last things, when we are coming from that place of deprivation. And again, everyone's timeline is different. I'm not saying that yours will take years, but for some women it may. And, we work with women that were put on their first restrictive diet at 10 or 12 years old and have been, dieting for 2 decades. So when you think about that timeline and what the body has endured, thinking about investing in your future health and, really taking time to move through things slowly and methodically and to repair, the hormones and the metabolism and all these pieces, it's a really important part of things, just to kind of practice patience and invest in your health and yourself for like the long game. And it's, of course, easier said than done, but really just trying not to be so short-sighted with like, oh my gosh, I, haven't seen these massive shifts with body composition in 6 months or a year. So I'm like jumping ship and going back to the rigid approaches. We need to think about other things that we can monitor to assess progress, like digestion, mood, energy, all sorts of other things that we'll touch on in a minute, as indicators of progress. And then we may need to practice patience with, seeing shifts with body composition.
And I think the biggest piece is really, in our practice and mine, and I know yours, is we often see, as a result of that, as a result of the invitation of those foundational practices, like we often see weight loss from there, not even needing to take the next step and
100%.
kind of going to that like restrictive place at all, because we've just found balance in the body, and then the release just gradually happens on its own. And there's a greater ease about it because it's no longer, it's kind of happening just as, elimination of symptoms is happening without white knuckling. And, I'll share that's in my own life. My relationship with my own weight really only started to shift when I really showed up for myself in terms of like fully nourishing. And it's funny to be in this industry and, having know what we know, and for myself, and then really like, finally 10 years in starting to practice it and seeing just that happen of like, oh, wow. Like when we start white knuckling, it's like the body's like, now we're safe. Now we can kind of release and be like in the body that we live and work with.
Yeah. It's the nourishment focus. It's powerful in so many ways. And when you're seeing improvements with health because you're promoting that safety and supporting the foundations, naturally the weight typically follows suit, and things really settle at a place that feels healthy and comfortable for an individual. I always will say to any potential client and, active clients where there's any, weight loss component or goal that, my clients that see a lot of success with getting to a body weight that feels really amazing for them are the clients that can acknowledge the desire to want to lose weight, but they commit to the process. They commit to the nourishment and doing the work and actually truly deeply caring for themselves. And clients that I have worked with in the past, and I bring this up on introductory calls with clients because I like to be very clear and transparent about, the approach and how we help, women be successful. But I will say that women that are overly fixated on seeing that shift with the scale in an immediate sense are often the ones that continue to create barriers over and over and over because, it's that instant gratification piece, but then it's also, the fact that we're not connecting the dots, that if we support the body fundamentally and if we focus on the nourishment, the weight will follow suit. We don't have to force and punish the body. And if we do, it usually backfires.
It totally does. And, in my practice and in everything being related to, my clients come from like gut health and, the world of constipation, it's like part of the challenge or part of the struggle with constipation can be under eating. But the under eating might come from, well, I'm bloated or I'm carrying weight and I'm trying to have this weight loss goal. So therefore I'm undernourishing and it's like this vicious cycle that's just going to keep playing out in this frustration loop because part of the constipation is the under eating and the stubborn weight that won't fall off is the under eating. And it's, part of the solution is the nourishment piece and really allowing then for the gut to function and the kind of hormonal regulation to function and so many of these other things to restore that optimal function. And it can feel kind of ironic. I know for clients in kind of the healing process of like, we need to feed the body and nourish the body in order for it to release weight. It's like the opposite of everything we've been told from, popular media for our entire lives. And it can feel terrifying when we're like first met with it and saying like, okay, I'm going to eat more. And you're telling me that this is going to get me to my goals. It's like, yes, every time.
It's been so ingrained in most of us that, you eat less, you work out more. And particularly if you are in a place where you feel like, your body's hanging on to a little bit more and it doesn't feel good for you, we totally acknowledge how scary that can feel to say, okay, well, I'm, going to eat more and I'm going to peel back on my workouts. And, you're really unlearning things that have been ingrained for, probably a lifetime or a big chunk of a lifetime. So know that it's very normal for something like that to feel scary and uncomfortable. But, showing up for yourself and prioritizing that nourishment, it, pays off tenfold with so many things, but there can be some discomfort that we need to work through in that process and, some mindset shifts for sure.
Always start with the mindset. So this conversation wouldn't be complete if we didn't mention the importance of evaluating our relationship with the scale. So many people on a weight loss journey might find that their relationship with the scale is triggering, as we can assign much more meaning to the numbers on the scale than they actually mean, such as, am I going to have a good day versus a bad day versus what number I'm going to see when I step on in the morning, or even deeper of, am I a good person or a bad person based on that number? And maybe these aren't exactly what we're telling ourselves as a result of whatever number comes back, but sometimes these are what we're feeling kind of at our core with just the number. And the number on the scale has a tremendous amount of limitations on what it can tell us. And I'll tell you, it can't tell you if you're a good or a bad person. It simply provides the mass of the body without insight into the different types of mass, such as muscle mass or fat mass or skeletal mass. It doesn't account for the normal fluctuations in fluid shifts or weight fluctuations that occur naturally, especially for women throughout their monthly cycle. It is only one number, and it should be looked at as one data point, if it's actually to be used at all. So the scale, the number that you receive, is one data point in time. So to make use of that information, it needs to be assessed over time as a pattern rather than taken as a marker of success or failure just on its own based on that one marker. So if you are using the scale, we want to be thinking about, maybe recording the value each week that we get from the day that we step on the scale. Maybe there's one day a week. And then over the course of that month or progressive months, we're able to actually look at what's the pattern that we're receiving from the scale, from that data point, because that's actually what is going to provide any insight to information and to, feedback from the body, again, based on the mass of the body. That's really all that we're getting from there. So a general rule of thumb too, that we like to use, if the scale produces an emotion for you, be it positive or negative, then it might not be the best relationship. So the goal is to have neutrality when it comes to the scale, to look at it as a data point rather than a celebration or a punishment. So, we might think that, well, no, I have a great relationship with the scale because the scale tells me what I want to hear. That we don't think that we have a problem with the scale, but that might still be some of that insight into what if one day it tells you what you don't want to see. And then we're kind of in that loop of challenging relationships with the scale. So if you find that you are struggling with your relationship with the scale, take a break. Put it in a place where you can't access it. Give it to a family member, a friend, throw it out the window, do what you will. But help yourself to break the relationship and create some distance and allow yourself to build a relationship with your body and how you feel rather than how the scale tells you to feel.
Such an important, piece of all of this. And I really, really cannot emphasize enough the emotions tied with seeing whatever that number is, whether they be bad or good, right? And I always will tell clients that I never want clients to fear the scale or to, feel like, oh, it's not something I can see. I want clients eventually to be able to look at whatever the number is on whatever scale it is and to just feel neutral and to be able to kind of put that into perspective. And at the end of the day, in my mind, the number doesn't matter. It's really a meaningless number. And what matters most is, how you feel in your body. Do you feel good physically and mentally? I care a lot more about, lab data and, your metabolic markers and things like that in terms of being actual indicators of health than weight itself. And I also want to point out that, weight is not just number. We don't weigh one thing. Weight is a range. So it is incredibly normal and necessary for the weight to be a little bit fluid. So weight is a range. And if we see things, kind of going up, going down, it doesn't hold a lot of meaning at the end of the day. And to Abby's point, if you do feel that this is a helpful data point for you to monitor, and you can do so with neutrality and kind of put this into perspective as one data point, then you want to assess patterns long term, and not kind of get caught up in shifts that are happening in an immediate sense. So how would you know, with everything we're talking about here, that your body is in a healthy and balanced place and it's, ready to maybe explore, more intentional shifts with body composition? So first, foremost, we can't emphasize the fundamentals enough in this process, really, no matter where you're coming at it from. So we want to make sure that we are covering those foundational things before, kind of thinking about any micro adjustments or really putting additional stress on the body. So again, balanced blood sugar, eating consistently, supporting healthy metabolic function, getting that quality sleep, focusing on the quality of calories that you consume, getting adequate sunlight, supporting the nervous system, moving your body and engaging in a balanced movement routine, breaking up sedentary time. So all of those things that Abby discussed in detail, we want to really work through those first and foremost. And we basically have a podcast episode on each and every one of these things that you can review to really dive in, in a lot of depth. So if you're working on all of these fundamentals consistently, this is where we want to start to tune into how your body is responding. And this is what can help us determine kind of where we're at and if the body is in a healthy, kind of safe place for exploring, any more intentional shifts with body composition. So some things to look for that might indicate your body is in a really good, safe place would be things like stable energy levels. So consistent, stable energy throughout the day, regular symptom-free periods. So no gnarly PMS symptoms, wonky cycle length, erratic ovulation. We want consistent symptom-free periods, consistent ovulation. Consistent digestion and healthy daily bowel movements, minimal digestive symptoms, balanced blood sugar, healthy body temperatures. Basal body temperature is a measure of potential, thyroid metabolic function. It also helps with, confirming ovulation and things like that. But if we have super low body temps, that might be an indication that our body is not in a place where it could handle, some of those stressors that we've discussed. Experiencing a stable mood, sleeping throughout the night, so we're not waking in the early hours of the morning, experiencing a healthy, consistent sex drive, and also consistent hunger cues, which is something that I think gets often overlooked. If you are going all day and you are not experiencing hunger, you're waking up in the morning, you're not hungry, this is a major metabolic red flag. So we want to experience hunger soon after waking. We want to experience consistent, stable hunger cues throughout the day as well. That's a great sign that, the metabolism, metabolic function is, well supported. So those are some things that might indicate, we could pursue some additional changes. Some signs that your body is not in a good place to, pursue any intentional shifts with fat loss, and that you might need more time in that safety space and really supporting your body with more stability would be things like fatigue, wonky energy, brain fog, difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep, a lack of hunger, which I just mentioned, irritability, low mood, a low libido. Also things like really intense cravings, specifically for things like sugar, carbs, salt, irregular wonky periods that I mentioned, and just general kind of weight loss resistance in terms of if the body is holding on to that safety weight, we may need to sit there for a bit and, really promote that safety on a continual basis. Things like bloating, constipation, a lot of digestive symptoms, that would indicate that there's probably some things that need to be investigated and supported. And also things like hair loss and dry skin. So some things to look for that would indicate safety in the body, and some things that would indicate that we need to prioritize more safety and, kind of continue supporting the body with a lot of nourishment. So if you do recognize that, okay, things are stable, I have a super solid foundation in place with all of the fundamental habits. Now, this is where we could explore some additional adjustments for fat loss if that feels relevant for you. And this might include focusing on more weightlifting, heavy weightlifting in particular, for supporting and, building that lean muscle mass, which increases the metabolic rate and, supports the insulin sensitivity. Really honing in and optimizing protein intake specifically, something that we find women often struggle with, as we work with them in practice. Also just generally adjusting macronutrients and, kind of the proportions of things and the balance of macronutrients coming into the diet. This can be a big one that is helpful for creating actually some adjustments with caloric intake that, happens a little bit more naturally and intuitively as you kind of play around with composition. Increasing walking and metabolic movement. So something that's also very overlooked for fat loss specifically is just walking and breaking up sedentary time. We have a tendency to want to work out harder, but often, integrating more of that metabolic movement, breaking up sedentary time, getting in those walks, that can be so effective. So lots of different things that we could focus on outside of a microcaloric restriction that can be really effective and really, really sustainable for fat loss. I will say there are certainly times where we might recommend a small, calorie deficit when appropriate, like that 100 to 300 calorie deficit, and, kind of doing this intentionally over a period of time, and then sort of, reverse dieting and bringing back up the caloric intake. But honestly, this is pretty, rare for me to do with clients in practice, and ultimately find that just focusing on these things that we're discussing, so the fundamentals first, and then getting a little bit more micro with the protein, the strength training, the walking, all these really supportive habits. I find that these things really lead to the positive shifts that people are looking for, and they do so in a way that is much healthier physically, mentally, as well as being more sustainable. And the macronutrient intake, like I mentioned, where, we're adjusting the amounts of protein and carbs and fat. This again can kind of be a way to tweak things and play around with things to see what feels good for you, in just a way that feels a lot more natural and, intuitive for shifting, body composition at the end of the day.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that in terms of when we focus on those areas, the need for caloric restriction doesn't seem to need to be there. I think there's a huge piece of, focusing on meal timing and greater satiety at those meals through the macronutrients, and really creating that schedule for the body and kind of helping the body to, establish that consistency in schedule. So we're talking about sleep and circadian rhythms and meal timing and movement and all of those pieces. And it kind of, we almost see that you don't need to focus on it so much. It just naturally happens just as we start to see other symptoms falling away. The symptom of weight starts to fall away, and we start to see that kind of gradual release of weight that, it no longer is the central focus. And I think there's greater joy, as we kind of talked about too, in there, of just feeling really in alignment with our lifestyle and our body and our behaviors, and feeling, not to say in control, but in a way, because I think the world of weight loss can lead a lot of people to feeling out of control and feeling like they can't, why isn't their body cooperating when they're, following XYZ protocol for weight loss or fad diet for weight loss. And it can lead people to feel very dysregulated to their body. And so when we come back into alignment, and we don't have to kind of white knuckle that weight loss journey, or white knuckle our own body into whatever it is that we're trying to white knuckle it into, that's where I think, we can have so much more joy and achieve that idea of health and body composition and all of those, as opposed to having the two roads that one leads to weight loss and the other leads to health, and you get to choose which one you want to go down. Because that, unfortunately, I think is the world of weight loss today. There's two roads, and the one to weight loss is very slim to none aligned with health.
It's so true. And I think there's for some reason, it's we don't believe that, a healthy, comfortable place with our weight can be achieved through, health promotion and all these habits that we're talking about. And we have this belief as a society that we have to be doing hard things. We have to be, and it's not to say that changing some of the things we're talking about with sleep schedule and eating schedule and all that isn't hard, but, I almost mean hard in terms of the white knuckling and, the punishment and the deprivation. It's we kind of poo-poo something like, okay, changing the meal timing, which feels like a much nicer thing to do, in my opinion. And instead, we want to meticulously track every piece of food that comes into our mouth, which is something that we know is very inaccurate. And we want to just focus on, the deprivation. And we have this funky attachment with feeling like that is the way, right? So Abby and I really want to highlight for you a different way and ultimately a more effective and sustainable way to achieve both health and body composition goals, which hopefully is exciting to hear.
That's really our goal of tackling this conversation, particularly at this time in the year when, at least when this episode is coming out, right around the new year, when a lot of people are go into the new year with a resolution for weight loss. And can we shift that resolution towards more alignment with our body, more kind of support and invitation of nourishment for our body? Still recognizing again that we can have desires for changes in body composition and for weight loss. It's not that you, in order to accept your body, you have to say, well, I guess this is the weight that I'll forever be. And if I'm not happy with it, then, I'm, stuck here. But that we can actually achieve both. But really first starting with that conversation of, why is this a goal of mine? And what mindset am I kind of coming at it from? And really looking kind of holistically at your lifestyle and your nutrition and all of the things that we talked about today, and all of the things that we've really been talking about this entire season in order to achieve, all of the goals that we have for ourselves. And so we hope that this perspective of weight loss connects with you and allows you to really see that, we can achieve all of our goals, be it health, be it weight loss, be it whatever it is. And let's carry that into the new year.
Heck yeah. And know that Abby and I are here to support you. So we'd love to hear from you and get your thoughts about this episode. This is definitely, again, a loaded topic, but we're always open for conversation. And, we'd love to support you as you dive in and navigate some of these things in the new year. And this is officially a wrap on season 1 of the Your Body Has Your Back podcast.
Woohoo!
Woo-woo. Thank you all so much for joining us this season. We've said it a million times, but we are so grateful for this community, for your support, for the connection that we've, made with all of you. And we are really, really looking forward to, supporting you in 2023 with your gut, hormone, and overall health healing journeys.